loud, but...
Oh, now it says it's recording.
Okay. All right. Thanks, darling. Yeah. So I'm more comfortable here. I'm on the floor. I'm all in my little natural environment. I've got my picture on here. I was wondering if you wanted to start off with 3 chants.
Sure, I'm happy to. What would you like to chant?
Do we just, actually, you know what I'd love to do? Well, what about we do 3 on Monarainis and then a chakra clearing chant, which is like your signature chant?
Sure, the Hari Om?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
Just to ask Dharma to be with us so we get good information and all that.
Yeah, would you like to do that now before everybody comes on?
Yeah, let's do it now.
Okay.
Okay.
Om Namo Narayani. Om
Namo Narayani. Om Namo Narayani. I'll let you do the Hari Om.
Hari Om Nam Lam Mam Vam Sim Ram Vam Yam Yam Ham Shiva Om Swaha.
Thanks, Kulreet.
So,
for anybody who is seeing this who doesn't know me or doesn't know Kulreet, I'm Yasmin Boland, and I'm an ex-journalist with a strong interest in mantra. But more importantly, this is Kulreet, Dr. Kulreet. Now, how do you say your surname? Is it Chaudhary?
Kulreet Chaudhary.
Kulreet Chaudhary, who wrote this amazing book, Sound Medicine, that I've been talking about constantly on and off in my daily messages for at least the last 2 or 3 weeks. I've actually been listening to it on Audible and reading it. So I've kind of been immersed in the whole thing. Actually, the first question I'd like to ask you, which has nothing to do with anything, but how come you didn't record it?
Because I was in India. I actually love recording my own books, but I couldn't because I was in India and my publisher is in New York.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I suppose that makes sense. But you've got someone, she's Indian, isn't she? Because she knows how to pronounce all the Indian words. Yes,
I looked specifically for people that were Indian so that they knew how to actually pronounce, you know, a good quarter of the book.
Yeah, no, she's very good. She's very good. Okay, so what we're really here to talk about today to start with is the mantra practice that we've all been doing. Those of us who go to Sri Shakti Amma's Peedam ashram in India, but also for readers of mine who I've been chanting with in my daily messages. We've been doing a chant, which, look, my husband very cleverly printed it out backwards, but I don't think it needs to be backwards on, I think on Zoom we can do it the right way round. I have it both ways.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay,
so thoughtful of him, though.
Yeah, exactly, I know. So now this chant, for anybody who's just late to the game here, this is a chant we've been chanting for COVID-19. And let's just go through it first, shall we, Kulreet, and explain to people, you know, Om Cream.
Om Cream is actually the Bija mantra for Kali. And so the Bija mantra is the seed mantra, which is the most basic vibration that captures the frequency of the entire mantra.
Wow. Okay. So cream captures the whole thing.
Cream captures the energy of Kali in particular. So when you say cream, when you're chanting cream, you're invoking in that one syllable the energy of Kali.
Right. Which we will talk about in a minute. The energy of Kali, because it's kind of an unusual energy.
It is. I was so excited that you wanted to talk about it because it is an unusual energy.
Yeah, it is. Okay, then we have Maha Kali. Now, I thought that Maha actually meant mother, but apparently it means great, or what does it mean?
It does mean great, but when you're putting it in front of Kali, the assumption is great mother. So when you say Maha Kali, you're saying great mother Kali.
Okay. Now, Sarva, we know, means all. Rogam, there's been a bit of discussion about. Sometimes it means disease, sometimes it means negativity. Does it mean, you know, what does it mean exactly? It doesn't mean disease, just disease, does it?
The reason why it means both is just like many Sanskrit terms, they have different layers of meaning. And so if you look at the source of disease, the source of all disease comes from negativity, right? And so when you're doing a mantra for removing all negativity, you're doing a mantra for removing all disease, mental as well as physical. So that's why it can be interpreted as both.
So what I've wondered as we've been chanting it is, you know, does that include the negativity like, you know, anger or jealousy or resentment or fear? Or, you know, a lot of people, because of lockdown, quarantine, whatever you want to call it, there's a lot of fear around right now. Is that going to help get rid of fear as well?
Absolutely. And it's something I wanted to talk about later when we speak about Kali in general and the impact that that energy has on fear. But the whole point of this mantra is for removing the negativity in your mind as well as in your body. And, you know, when I look at what's happening purely from a medical standpoint, the psychological response to what has been happening, I feel is so much more detrimental than the actual physical implications that happen if you're infected by the virus. And so I'm sharing this mantra equally for, you know, protecting people physically, but just as much, it's important to protect people from the negativity of fear, which I think is creating much, much more havoc than the actual virus.
Yeah, well, I'd have to agree there. I've actually literally deleted some of the news apps that I had on my phone because I noticed that they were kind of the more sensational news outlets. And I just noticed every time I read them, I was like freaking out. So I just deleted them because the fear that's being created is off the scale, you know. And we all have a lot to be grateful for, you know, because, I mean, anyone who's safe at home with their family, with food in the fridge, you know, and the internet, very lucky. So I don't think we need to go into fear. And people keep saying it's like a war. And I'm like, yeah, but there's no bombs dropping, you know.
There's no, and you know, it's interesting because one of the things that we found out, like in California, which is where I'm at right now, is that the viral outbreak actually started here back in December, but everybody just called it a really severe flu. So California's been dealing this for months without any of the kind of traumatic response that, you know, we're seeing now, because everybody just thought it was a severe flu. So this mantra is equally as important for helping people to manage the fear that's been ignited with this.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, maybe we all just needed a break off the merry-go-round of life as well. I mean, obviously there are people who are dying, and it's not, we're minimizing that, but what you're saying is you know, it's not something to be terrified of. And I didn't introduce you properly, Kulreet. I'll do it. I will have put a proper description in when I put this on Facebook. But, you know, for people who don't know, Kulreet is a doctor and actually a neurologist. Is that right? Like, you know, she's not, you know, like me, I'm an ex-journalist, I'm interested in mantra. She actually comes from a place of, you know, high education here, as well as understanding, you know, the East and the West. So, Nasti. Now, again, this has had a bit of, is it this, is it that? Initially, we were told it's destroy. Then I was told it's go away. What's your take on this, since you seem to know all about it?
The direct translation that we were given at the center by Amma is go away. But I think, again, when you're translating, and much of this mantra is actually in Tamil, which is a language that is older than Sanskrit, But when you are translating these ancient languages, you have to always keep in mind that there's multiple levels of meaning. And so nasi nasi can be interpreted as, go away, go away. But when you are applying it to removing negativity, you can also interpret as the stronger meaning of destroy all negativity. So it's really important when you're looking at this mantra that the interpretation or the application of the word destroy here is destruction of negativity. So it's actually a very positive mantra, if that makes sense. That even though you're saying destroy, you're saying destroy negativity. So it can be interpreted as both go away or destroy, depending on what you apply, nasi to.
Sure. Now, another thing I was told, but this was like fourth hand, it was Amma said this to someone, and our mutual friend Natalie, I think, was listening, or someone was listening, and whoever it was, it may not have been Natalie actually, sorry Natalie, it may have been someone else, I don't remember, but somebody else put it on the WhatsApp group and I read it. So that's like fourth hand information here. But this sort of Chinese whispers that came down was that Na means soul and Si means fire. And in fact, it's sort of like use the fire of our soul to destroy all the negativity. Is there truth in this interpretation? Have you heard that?
There's partial truth in that. So these bija mantras, Na and Si, are both bija mantras. So again, seed mantras. And Na is actually the bija mantra for earth, and Si is the bija mantra for fire. And so we're referring now to the theory in the Vedas and in Siddha medicine that all of creation is based on these 5 elements. And so what you're putting together is the bija mantras of earth and fire. And because the body is predominantly earth, and since we're trying to burn up, you could say, this negativity, and burn up literally a virus that is heat sensitive. So you're using those particular elements to get rid of, that effect. So nasi in this particular case can be interpreted as, removing some physical element that is negative by the use of fire. And that's why it's very, very difficult to translate, these ancient Tamil mantras and ancient Sanskrit mantras just by word for word or line for line. You have to look at the entire mantra and say, oh, in this case, these sounds are being used to invoke this particular energy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. There's so many questions coming up in my mind as we speak, but let me try and get through them. So we're saying that Na and Si are also Bij mantras.
Yeah,
so I actually thought when before we started, really, we did the Hari Om Nam Lam, the chakra clearing mantra that you have recorded, which is on iTunes for anybody who wants it. It's beautiful. So that, I thought that must be all the Bij sounds, and obviously not.
Oh, no. So there's lots and lots of bija mantras, and most of the longer mantras are actually just collections of bija mantras. So even when you're doing a longer mantra, it holds within it the bija mantras. There's many, many, many different types of bija mantras. And when you combine them in different ways, you're creating different energies. Look at it as kind of the alphabet, that you have different letters, and then as you start to bring them together, you're creating a different sentence, a different phrase to elicit a different type of communication. So it's very, very similar with mantras. So, and the sounds behind them, the bija mantras.
All right. So now, just to be clear, this is Tamil.
So there's a lot of overlap between Tamil and Sanskrit. But the Sarvarogam Nasi is a classic Tamil mantra. And that doesn't mean that you can't hear some of the same sounds in Sanskrit, like Om Krim Mahakali, that is also represented in Sanskrit. And so because these languages do have, somewhat of a connection, you'll see some overlap. But this is more of a traditional Tamil mantra, correct?
Okay. And do you know, approximately how many bija mantras there are? Are there like 10, 20, 50, 100, hundreds?
No, it's a great question. And I don't, because, and I don't know if the work has actually been done, but keep in mind, many of these bija mantras are hidden. They are not shared. And so it'd be also very difficult to do a formal study, because even Nasi, for example, is not typically a bija mantra or the combination of bija mantra that is shared. Amma, gave this specifically because of this time, but it's hard to do a study of bija mantras, because even though you can look at the ones that are written, there are so many that are unwritten.
Wow, okay. And so Amma has given us this mantra for the coronavirus. Is it purely for the coronavirus, or can we use it in the future?
Absolutely. No, I'm so happy that you brought this up. So, people have asked me, is this a coronavirus mantra? And I say, no, it's a mantra for removing negativity. Mantras have so many multiple purposes, and that's one of the beauties of mantras. And Amma happened to bring this particular very, very powerful mantra out at the time that the coronavirus was coming out. And so we were given it at the Holistic Center, in India, right when China was starting to experience it. And so it happens to be a mantra that can address the coronavirus. But I have really fallen in love with this mantra, and I think we will probably continue to use it at the Holistic Center, because we have really noticed that since we started using it there, it has purified the environment in many, many different ways, just in terms of the way that people were thinking, some of the administrative things that we all struggle with when we're creating a business. I've just noticed that we're coming together with a joint purpose for creating greater positivity as a staff there ever since we started using this mantra. So for us, unless we're told otherwise, this will probably be one of the mantras that we do in our sound baths at the Holistic Center on a regular basis.
Thanks. So did this mantra exist before, or did Amma kind of put it together for the Chinese outbreak?
So as far as I know, these mantras exist. Like when we say to create a mantra, it almost doesn't make sense, because when you look at what mantras are, they're fundamental reverberations of creation. And so we can certainly select them and pull them out at given times, but these were the sounds or vibrations that were created at the time that all of life was created. And so there's times when different mantras are given or rediscovered, but when we say have they actually been created, they may be re-emerging, but the actual creation of the vibration was at the time that life itself was created, because these vibrations all are impacting the entire physical world, and they all impact the 5 elements. And so they were part of just the initial, you can say, conception of life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that totally, I'm sorry, just looking for a pen so I can write down things as they occur to me. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And I know you were saying, so one thing I wonder about is, so we're saying, for example, nasi means go away or destroy or whatever, we were going to come to on that, really go away. But so, and you're saying it's in Tamil. So is it a word that people use in the street, like if they didn't like someone? Nasi, is it a Tamil word like that?
A really great question. I'm not fluent enough in Tamil to say that I'm using it, but I can tell you that when we first introduced it, several of the staff members weren't sure exactly what it meant. And so, and others were. So it's not something that I believe is used in common speech.
Right.
Like it's not conversational,
Right.
Just like Sarvarogam is not really conversational speech.
Right.
But it's something that, I think that the parts of the Tamil population, especially parts that do have a connection, to spiritual practice, have probably heard. And keep in mind that they're sounds. And so you'll see these sounds over and over and over in the Tamil vocabulary.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite mysterious, isn't it? It's quite unfathomable in a way, trying to understand this, you know, without probably 20 years of study kind of thing.
And even beyond the 20 years of study, I mean, just like we're seeing with, you know, the information that's coming out of the Siddha records, as soon as you start to understand one part, it opens an entirely new platform to, you know, 100 more questions.
That's exactly how I feel right now. So I actually wanted to ask you, there's two things I want to ask you, which I haven't put on my list of questions, so I'll get them quickly. But I mean, these siddhas, like, it's only in reading your book, Sound Medicine, everybody, it's a really good book. It's only in reading that book that I've heard of, you know, Siddha medicine, the siddhas. I've heard of it, but I never realized they were like amazing. Like, what can you tell us about them in terms of how they relate to mantra? And who were they? And then they were, how long ago? Was it 8,000 years ago?
Well, it's so hard to talk about the siddhas, and I talk about this in the book because once, you know, an individual actually enters into that siddha state, they're no longer really bound by time or space, and it makes it unbelievably difficult now to explain who they were when they're not bound by the same kind of laws of nature that we consider as you know, true and valid and factual. And just to give an example, there's one Siddha master, Bogar, who you know, lived in South India, but then later on, you know, he describes leaving his body that he had in South India and taking on another form in China. And then he describes his, you know, few hundred years in China in his writings later on. So you're not talking about normal human lifespans. And so it's really, really difficult to say, oh, and this is when they existed. I can tell you the way that I have come to know them. They are a lineage of knowledge that I think really started like pretty much at the beginning of whenever knowledge began being passed on. And they're just essentially just one with nature. They have kind of transcended the typical boundaries that we have with life. And so when they came to Tamil Nadu, then we kind of gave them this label of the Siddha lineage, but you can find very, very similar groups and possibly even the same groups in different parts of the world. And everything that they did, it's on a quantum level, you know, or even on a it's on a subatomic and quantum level. So their medical system was on a quantum level. And when we start talking about things on a quantum level, we're really starting to look at how things function on a vibrational level. And so when you say, what was their relationship to mantra? They were able to perceive them and they were able to use them. They were able to create life and physical manifestations through the use of sound. And so sound, you know, I'm trying to think of an equivalent that we have. I mean, sound to them was, you know, how they manifested physical creation and anything within the mental realm. So sound to them
was the word.
Yes, it's exactly right. And if you look at most ancient, you know, spiritual traditions, they talk about the word or vibration. And so you can say they understood the source of life and they understood how to use the source of life. But the one thing I've learned about the Siddhas is they only want to be known about when they want to be known about. I mean, you can only know them when they really want, like, you know, the world to find out about them. Otherwise, they're extremely secretive. And this seems to be a time that they are bringing out the knowledge once again.
Yeah. And were they all male, do you know?
No, they weren't. Actually, there were female siddhas. And again, it's very hard to keep any kind of chronological history of who were the siddhas because they were by nature, you know, typically separated away from society. And so to take like a running list of, okay, who are all the siddhas on the planet at this time is just very difficult. But there are certain groups of siddhas that were well studied, especially in Tamil Nadu, and among them there were women.
Somebody has to make a film. That would be such a great movie. to go into that.
Funny that you said that, because that is in the works, and I'll leave it at that, because I don't want to steal the thunder of the people involved, but that is in the works.
Yeah, it would be a fantastic film. So one other question that I'd just like to ask you, Kulreet, because I've heard this like maybe 5 times in the last 36 hours or something. This fact that we have all the elements in us, so fire, earth, air, water, and ether, correct?
Mm-hmm.
They're the 5. And that we have them in our body, and that we have them in our hand, and our hand represents them, and that's where the mudras come from, and so on. Why do you think it's so important that we know about these 5 elements making us up? And does that have anything to do with mantra as well? Just because it keeps coming up?
Well, it's, you know, to answer the question, it depends on if you think it's important to understand what the material of the universe and what you are made up of. One of the great kind of aha moments that I had when I came into Ayurvedic medicine was all of my idiosyncrasies and all of my imbalances suddenly made sense. And it suddenly made sense why, for me, you know, eating a salad was not going to be the way that I would build a healthy diet. And so if you want to have kind of a manual to how to run this body and, you know, how to run this mind, then it's extremely important, because not all recommendations are the same depending on what your buildup is of the different elements. And it also helps you to understand how the outside environment impacts you. I mean, just a really simple example is, you know, in India being as warm as it was, I had a completely different kind of physical response to the environment. And so I was taking different herbs, eating different foods. And now here in San Diego, it's been very rainy, much colder. And so I've had to change my diet completely. And if I was eating what I was eating, some of the things that I was doing in India, it would result in an imbalance now. So it's just a blueprint for you understanding how to feed yourself, understanding what are the things that can create things like depression or anxiety. And people are usually really surprised that, you know, it's the snack that they're having is having a direct impact on their mind, but it's because of the way it's upsetting, you know, one of the elements in their body.
Right. And from what I understand from your book, it's the balance of the elements that then contributes to the doshas.
Exactly. The different doshas are made up of the 5 elements. And it's not that you're trying to have equal parts of the 5 elements. It's that you're trying to create balance for what is appropriate for you, for what is unique for you. And so the second part of your question, you said, well, what does it have to do with mantras? Well, like the chakra meditation that, you know, Amma gave, which I talk about in the book, that is a mantra for balancing all 5 elements. Sound is an extremely profound way of balancing all 5 elements. And it's a very affordable way to balance all 5 elements. And even since I've been here, I've noticed how much more reliant I've been on the chakra mantra, simply because this particular weather really throws me off much more than the warm weather in India. So I think it's when you're out of balance, you really appreciate the impact of the mantras for bringing you back into balance.
Yeah. So 2 things. So first of all, the chakra balancing chant, as we call it, I think. So that's kind of like a tri-dosha mantra, is it?
Yeah, it's a great way to describe it. It's a mantra for, you know, I do 2 mantras every single day. I mean, that's my kind of baseline. And the chakra mantra is one that I do every single day for 20 minutes, because it just moves all of the energy. It's just any place that is blocked. I look at it as kind of like it's yoga for both the body and the mind. And it's like, it's stretching and preparing the body for whatever other mantra you want to do. Because when you have a block and you know, there's some kind of imbalance in the elements, when you're doing kind of your devotional practice or your other mantra, you'll notice that you're not going as deeply with it. So that's just my go-to. That's like, for me, like taking a shower is doing that chakra mantra, because I think it's just so profound. And the second one I do is more of my spiritual practice.
And is that, will you share, is that Om Namo Narayani, or is it something else?
It's Om Namo Narayani. And I actually grew up doing transcendental meditation. So I was given a specific bija mantra, and I shifted over to the Om Namo Narayani mantra because when you have a spiritual teacher, and for those of you know, us who are on this webinar that know of Amma, when you have a spiritual teacher that gives you a mantra, it's already charged. It's more powerful than if somebody just randomly gives you, you know, a bija mantra. And so because of the charge that's been placed behind it, I have found that my entire mantra practice just, it accelerated almost overnight once I started using that. And honestly, once I coupled it to the chakra mantra, I felt everything really opening up. So those are the two that are my go-to mantras. And then in cases like this, like when we have something like a pandemic, then, you know, you can use a mantra for that particular situation. Or if you're starting a business and you want to remove obstacles, you can use a mantra for that. Or if you want to bring in more wealth, like under specific circumstances, you can then choose a mantra for a short period of time. But it's really important to have a mantra practice with the regular use of a mantra, because you'll go deeper and deeper and deeper into those mantras that you're doing on a regular basis over years.
So, Kulreet, will you tell us about your daily routine, in as much as how, you know, when you do your mantras, and also this thing of, I know Jessie from Pedum has said to me a few times, you must only do one at a time, or it sounds like you do two at a time. But, you know, like, how do you then, what happens if you're doing this Kali mantra and you're doing your chakra balancing, you're doing your Om Namo Narayanis? How does all that work on a really practical level?
And I had actually asked specifically, you know, about this question, and she also just, you know, agreed that doing the chakra mantra on a regular basis and doing Om Namo Narayani is perfectly okay. But to Jesse's point, he's correct in that you should have a mantra practice with a particular mantra. And for me, these have really become two parts of the same experience now. But it's, the whole point is you should have a particular practice. And so my like everyday routine, which, you know, granted is a little unusual just because I work at the holistic center, but my home routine is, you know, pretty much as soon as I wake up in the morning, the first thing that I do is my mantra practice. And so I do pranayama, which is, you know, the breathing exercise. I do alternate nostril breathing for 5 minutes. And
are you still in your PJs at this point?
I am, and you know, I realized that that is not the typical recommendation. The typical recommendation is that you should get out of bed, go take your shower, brush your teeth. And what I have found, and you know, again, people have to find what is good for their routine. This is just what has happened for me, is that the second that I get up and start moving around, something else will occupy my mind and my time. And so I, you know, ideally it's, you know, go take your shower, then, you know, do your yoga asanas, then do your pranayama. It just does not work for me for how busy my life has become. Because if my son hears me walking around in the house, you know, and he's up, like there goes my mantra practice. So even though this is not what is typically prescribed, this is how I do it. I wake up, I'm completely unkempt, I'm in my pajamas, and I know that if I do my mantra practice right then and there, I will get it in 100% of the time. So that is just what has worked for me. For people who have a more flexible schedule, I highly recommend that you do it, you know, kind of the more prescripted way. But then I'll do my pranayama for 5 minutes, and then I do 20 minutes of the chakra mantra. And like I said, by the time I'm done with that chakra mantra, I just feel so open, and I feel, you know, literally like my mind and body just feels fertile to plant the next sound. And then that's when I do my Om Namo Narayani for 30 minutes. And so that is, you know, almost an hour routine in the morning. But when on the days that I don't do that, which is hardly ever, it's usually if I'm traveling, but if there's some strange thing that happens where I don't get to it, I can guarantee that I'm going to lose that hour later on in the day to some mishap happening or some wasted energy, or, you know, that investment in the morning always saves me more time. So that for me is just, I do not miss it. And then I go about with getting up, getting dressed, you know, taking my shower, But that's the only way that for me right now in my life as a mom, as a wife, as a physician, as the unit head of the center, that is how I ensure that I get my mantra practice in. And then, right now, because we're doing the group chanting, then at 10 a.m. usually, although not today, because it was the only time I had available today to be able to talk to you. But usually 10 a.m. I get on with everybody and we do the Kali mantra, for 30 minutes. But at the center, we will also do that as a group. So I get the opportunity through work to also, do that mantra with the staff all together.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Because I was given one mantra by Amma that I'm never quite sure if I'm allowed or should do it, because I'm also doing another mantra or this mantra. So it's interesting what you're saying is you've basically made the chakra mantra and the Om Radharani's are kind of a one thing, and you just stick with those. And now the Kali mantra on top, briefly, at least for as long as we're doing it during this cycle.
Yeah, and I think people do have to figure out what really works for them. Like that combination for me it's worked. Om Radharani has worked ever since I was introduced to it. But adding chakra mantra for me is just worked. I just noticed I don't have to be on as many herbs. I don't have to do as much in the rest of my life when I am doing that combination.
And do you have your tridosha tea in the morning, your prime tea from your first book?
So now that I'm in California and I don't have staff to make it for me, so as soon as I'm done, that's the first thing that I make. The first thing that goes on the stove is the water for the prime tea, because I sip that all throughout the day.
Yeah, I'm actually quite a fan. I've read all your books, I think.
It's amazing. I feel the difference when I'm not doing it. In India, it's a lot easier because I just come to the center and it's already made.
Let's tell people what's in there. So you boil up some water and it's half a teaspoon of cumin seeds, half a teaspoon of coriander seeds, and half a teaspoon of fennel seeds. Mm-hmm. Boil for 10 minutes. Now, my husband and I are always wondering, is that more powerful than steeping it overnight in a thermos, which is the best method?
So when I was very, very busy, when my mornings were really busy, I used to actually put the seeds in a thermos and put hot water, and I had this fantastic thermos that stayed hot for 24 hours. And that's how I would make it in about 4 cups of water. Now that I'm here and I have the time, I make it, in the mornings, just by boiling it on the stovetop. But really, either way is perfectly fine.
Either way is fine.
And if you want to make it stronger, like now I use a teaspoon. I don't use just a half a teaspoon, but you can also go up to a teaspoon.
Right. Okay. So now let's talk about what I kind of think is almost the elephant in the room with the Kali mantra. Jagatambe touched on it the other night when she spoke about mantras on one of these Zooms for everybody. And she was saying that some people had kind of feelings about the mantra that it's quite a harsh thing. I think it's because we were told it means destroy, plus we've got the Kali energy. Maybe we need to talk about Kali first, but I'm kind of reminded of one of the most recent times I was in India when Amma was preparing, I think for the new Lakshmi temple it must have been, and was chanting and chanting and chanting this beautiful, gentle, peaceful, uplifting, warm and fuzzy Lakshmi mantra. And now we've got this one, which is like, roar. So, and I know I'm not the only one who feels like this. And I've had, I won't say anyone's names, but I've had conversations with people who've been like, I find it so intense, this thing, So what about this? That's been quite a bit of a struggle for me. Part of me is like, can't we just do a healing mantra instead of this, go away?
I think you have to choose the mantra for the event. And so I think it's very difficult to try to give any kind of a general prescription for how somebody's going to experience a mantra, because again, your individual energies are interacting with the energies of the mantra. So there's no way to predict what it's going to look like. But what I can offer is just my own personal experiences with Kali and how they've changed over time. And I want to let you know that my initial response to Kali was very much the same of like, ooh, do we really want to go in there? Because it's a very protective, it's a very strong energy. It's not an energy you tiptoe around. And I think the first time I was really exposed to that Kali energy was by going to a Kali temple, beautiful Kali temple in Southern California. And I, almost a decade ago, and it was so intense, and the changes that started happening in my life were so intense, and honestly they were too fast for me. And I said, I can't do this. This is just too fast. Even though I knew all of the changes that were being made were necessary, they were just too intense for me to kind of take on with the normal rhythm of my life. Now, fast forward to moving, to India, and our center there is so unusual because normally like an Ayurvedic center would have a Dhanvantri temple, that's the energy associated with Ayurveda, or a Siddha center would have like a Shiva temple, and we are built next to a Kali temple. And it's just such a completely different energy, and I think this has been the general response of all of our guests that have come, and this was certainly the response that I felt when we moved there, was there's just such an intensity and that things happen very, very fast.
They do. Can I just ask, where's the Kali temple at Pedam?
It's very, very close to where the center is. It's not even a place that you're normally allowed to go to, or I should say it's not publicly advertised to go to, but it's just a few minutes walk from.
Is it on Sri Puram land, or is it? It's
on Sri Puram land where the holistic center is built. So it's within the, and when we recommend for people to go and visit it, although it's not necessary, it's very much the energy comes to you.
Yeah.
But, so what we see with that energy is just rapid transformation. It's very, very rapid transformation. And I'll be honest, now that I've been soaking in that energy, and especially since we have done the Kali mantra since the events first started happening in China, my relationship to the energy, that Kali energy, has completely changed. I'm not afraid of it. It no longer feels too intense. It actually feels very nurturing and loving and so ridiculously protective that somebody had asked me, because I'm separated from my family right now, my boys are in India, and with all of the uncertainty, they said, aren't you afraid? And I said, no, I'm actually even having a hard time resonating with the idea of fear. And I give that to this mantra, having done it now for so many months. So I think just like with every mantra, your relationship really changes depending on where you are in life.
Yeah.
And so when you're talking about something like a pandemic, you can't bring in something soft and soothing. This is time for rapid transformation for the entire planet. It's a time for rapid transformation, for us individually. So it's a completely appropriate, mantra for what we're going through right now. And it's a mantra, we have just fallen in love with it. It's an energy I have absolutely fallen in love with. I've never felt so safe and so secure and so just taken care of in my entire life. And I wanted to share just my husband's experience with the Kali energy, because I thought it was so beautiful. Mine has been a very, very maternal experience with it. And his has been one of just such total expansiveness. And the way he described it was Kali being like the night sky, that even when you have light, it has to travel at a certain speed and it only goes for so far. And the way he described Kali was, it just encompasses everything. And I said, I'm feeling the emotional equivalent of that which encompasses everything is now protecting me. So I completely agree to where I was 10 years ago, was not ready for this energy. Compared to now, I'm just kind of like, hey, bring it on. I want the intensity. I want the intense transformation now in life.
Yeah, I actually feel like since I almost wrote to Amma about a week ago to say, can't we do a healing mantra now, Amma? Because this is like getting too much. I literally almost wrote to Amma and I thought, Yasmin, just stop. So I didn't. So I've just gone through it and I feel like I've come out the other side of it, which is really interesting. But also, because you're saying that one's relationship with the mantra can evolve. And I do feel quite differently about it today than I did, say, just a week ago, when I was really like, oh, it's so, it's so, I don't know, like I actually lost my temper a couple of times, and I don't know if that was to do with just cabin fever of being in lockdown, but I kept thinking, it's that Kali mantra, it's like making me into Kali or something. But now I feel like I've come through that somehow, if it's possible to come through something like that in a week.
No, it is. And that's what you're speaking to, and you're saying it in such a beautiful and authentic way. You're speaking to the capacity of mantras to transform. And I think it's absolutely okay to have those strong reactions to a mantra and to say, like, mantra, I don't like what you're doing right now, because I feel that way about certain herbs that I take that I know are changing me. I feel that way, when you're involved in any type of healing, where you can feel the transitions where you go, I don't really want to do this. I don't want to have to change like this. It feels hard. And so mantras are another tool set that create the same outcome. And I think it's beautiful that you're being so honest, and that other people are being so honest to say, hey, this is intense. And like, holy smokes, this is nothing like those gentle healing mantras, because it's not. But that is the power of mantra.
Yeah, it is amazing. So for anyone who's watching who doesn't know, I'm not sure if I've mentioned it clearly enough, but Kulreet is actually trained in Eastern and Western medicine, you could say, in Ayurvedic and Western medicine, allopathic medicine. So like one thing in the book, it sort of goes a little bit over my head at times, because you get into these quite, intense medical studies, which are, they're pretty intense. You're talking about things on a cellular level. So one thing I was interested to know is, because Amma has always said that if we do a mantra, the ultimate aim is to do it silently, as opposed to intoning it with our voices. And of course, in all the groups that we're doing it out loud. I've got a few questions around it. One is, on our groups, is it okay? Well, we're doing it as a group intention, so I understand that's why we're doing it out loud. Does it still, because in your book, you're talking about how mantras can actually affect us on a cellular level and kind of bring things like that it could be out of balance on a cellular level back into balance. Can you just speak about that a little bit with your experience as a doctor, basically?
Yeah, absolutely. So do you mind if I just split that up into two questions? And if I take on the biology of sound first, because there is a biology. And one thing I've really taken for granted, and maybe other people feel the same way, is when Amma is feeding us, literally just spoon feeding us this information, it sounds so simple that, oh, you do a mantra, and Amma has said this many times, it changes every cell in your body. And I'm like, oh, okay, that sounds great. The science behind it is actually so complex. You have to understand some of the fundamental principles of quantum physics, and then understand some of the biological mechanisms that we're only now beginning to discover. So even though it sounds so simple, when you actually start to break down, so wait, how is this actually happening? It's such an elegant system. And so without going, so deeply into the quantum physics part, I'm just going to say that we are vibration.
Sorry.
I said we are vibration. All of us are vibration. We're vibrational beings. The world, all of creation is vibrational in nature. And sound isn't just what you hear. Sound is really just the vibrational ocean that is encompassing all of that. And
so it's not just what we hear.
No, because if we say that sound is just what we hear, then we would have to say that what a dog hears that we can't hear isn't sound. Does that make sense? So we were built to pick up certain frequencies. That does not mean that other frequencies don't exist. So what we call sound are the frequencies that we're able to translate through our inner ear, that eventually creates a nerve impulse that our brain picks up and says, oh, I hear that. We'll call that sound. But that is existing even when you can't hear it. But here's the beautiful thing. Your cells hear the vibrations that you cannot hear with your ears. They still hear them. And there's actually structures on the cells called primary ciliae that pick up those vibrations, and your cells respond to that. They actually change their formation, change their biochemistry in response to them. So would we say then that our cells have ears You know, are we saying that they are hearing other vibrations? I mean, you see how the terminology gets a little bit kind of abstract when you start accepting that we actually pick up vibrations in many different ways. Noise is one of them, but we actually transform on a cellular level in response to sound. So now the second part that you asked is, you know, to chant out loud or silently. Again, mantras have different purposes, so it depends on why you're doing it. When you're trying to activate something, like when you're trying to turn water into something that is healing, then you chant out loud so that the water molecules actually pick up that vibration. And so when you are chanting as a group, because you're trying to create a group coherence, a group intention, that becomes easier to do if you're all chanting together out loud. It's easier to connect. Not that people can't meditate in silence, but I think, you know, for when you're doing something as a sankalpa, as an intention for the world, there's a power to bringing people together, and so then you would do it out loud. Now, on a daily practice, absolutely doing it internally, quietly in your mind is more powerful when you want that influence to be more internal.
So when you're in your PJs doing it every morning, are you singing it out loud or is it silent?
No, it's absolutely silent for a lot of different reasons. One, because it's more powerful, but also my husband and I are doing it at the same time, and we're not always doing the same, you know, mantra, so there's a practical part of it. But no, as soon as I wake up, I do it silently. And because keep this in mind too, what is the ultimate purpose of a mantra? What is the ultimate goal of a mantra?
To bring balance? I'm not really sure.
That's one of the goals, but the ultimate goal of the mantra is to actually transcend sound and bring you into silence. So that's difficult to fulfill the ultimate goal of a mantra, to transcend everything that we know as thought, which is, you know, thoughts also occur as sound in your head. But ultimately, you're trying to hit to that transcendental place of silence. So that's hard to do if you're chanting it out loud.
Because I think where I'm like struggling to understand a bit as well, and probably a lot of people are in the same boat. I did exactly what you were saying before. I started with meditating, and I was given a mantra, which was transcendental meditation mantra, and then I went to Amma, and Amma said, no, out with that one, in with this one, and all that. But I think, you know, for me, there's talking about this Kali mantra, which is almost a song, but not a song. There's kirtan, which I'm going to ask you about in a minute anyway. There's meditation where you might just do so hum, but I suppose you could do the Kali mantra, which is what you're doing, or you're doing the chakra clearing mantra silently. And it sort of becomes confused about what's chanting, what's meditation, you know, what's the difference? Are they the same? Are they equally valuable? Should we be aspiring to one rather than the other, or is it all good? Well,
I think it's a great question. It's a really great question. And part of it is just semantics. And, you know, I struggled with this with the book is when I referred to chanting, for example, just because chanting is more traditionally correlated to a discussion around mantras. But most of the meditation practices that we do nowadays are mantra meditations. And so, you know, you could say that's silently chanting. And so the terminology just becomes a little bit confusing just because of the way that it was traditionally said, you know, versus how we're using it now. But meditation, when you're using a mantra silently, and like Soham is a mantra, and you could use this Kali mantra in silent meditation if you decide to do so. But that is mantra meditation. Now, sometimes, like in transcendental meditation, you're given a bija mantra, but just like the Kali mantra, it also has a bija mantra, but then it has the full mantra as well. And so it just kind of depends on, I think, you know, what works for you and what tradition, you know, you are ascribed to. Like for me, transcendental meditation worked absolutely phenomenally for the majority of my life. And then when I developed this more devotional relationship with Amma, that Om Namo Narayani, it took me to places that I think it would have taken me the rest of my life.
Blew it out of the water.
It changed everything, and it felt like it almost changed everything overnight. And so, that's a very rare and unusual experience when you have a charged, mantra given to you like that. But then, when you look at doing kirtan, again, it depends. Are you just listening to it? If you're singing it, you're basically just adding music, which also activates certain parts of the brain. And oftentimes the music is devotional in nature. And so that sense of devotion helps you to open up your heart. And so if you have difficulty in finding that devotional connection in your meditation practice, which is really, really, really important, and something that most meditation teachers do not teach is, and I talk about it in the book, but there's a biology and there's a quantum physics to devotion that is absolutely necessary for controlling the mind. The field effect of devotion is so critical for meditation, so critical. And that was a big part of what I learned with the chanting, the meditation of Om Namo Narayani was, without the devotional aspect of it, you're barely getting 50% of the results. So kirtan is great for helping you to open, the heart. And I had one enlightened saint, the way he described all of this, of either doing kirtan and doing meditation in your mind, and versus also like reading spiritual books. He said, all of it is like bathing kind of in a different way. Like you take a bath, when you're taking a shower, and then there's the type of cleansing you would get if you go outside and it's raining. And there's a different kind of cleansing you would get if you step into a river, that each one has a cleansing effect, but in a different way.
And one's not better than the other.
I still think the silent mantra meditation is the most important thing that you can do. And that is based on my own experience, my own practice, but also based on the research. And again, looking at what is the ultimate goal of a mantra practice? The ultimate goal of a mantra practice is to transcend the mind, is to transcend all the noise of life, and to enter into a space of silence. And, as a neurologist, I can't see how you could do that if you're making sound. Now, I'm not saying all of the other things can't deepen your silent mantra meditation. I think they can, but I think ultimately that is where you're going. And, Amma has talked about this. Many enlightened saints have talked about that there's ultimately a point where the mantra drops, where the resonant frequency has taken hold on a cellular level, where the sound is no longer necessary. So the goal is always to be united with that silence. And so I don't know how you can do that without a silent mantra meditation practice.
Yeah, I think Deepak Chopra, who a lot of people will know of, and who's obviously ex-transcendental meditation himself, he talks about dropping into the void. And I've studied with people who studied with him, so I've kind of got the same teachings. I think they all studied with a Maharishi Yogi fellow in the 70s. And I know that they say that, the idea is to, as you say, lose the mantra and to drop into the silence, which makes me wonder if when we're doing our daily chantings with the Kali mantra, we should have 5 minutes of silence at the end where we're actually continuing to do the mantra just in our mind, as opposed to just sitting there with the energy, which is what we've been doing.
You could, but I think that mantra was really created for a different, purpose. But I do think like your personal practice, which is why I do that chakra mantra first, because it allows me to get to that void state so much faster once I start to do the Om Namo Narayani. If I don't do the chakra mantra first, it takes so much longer. And some of my most profound meditations have been literally, just in complete silence. I didn't even know 2 hours went by, had no clue that I was meditating for that long, and then just kind of came out of it and was like, oh, where have I been? And I just felt completely, different. But the way that I got to those points was, through mantra meditation until the mantra stops, the mantra drops. and then you're just in a place of total void. And the only reason you know so much time has gone by is because you can't move your legs.
Yeah. Look, I just got one last question because we're almost out of time, but I wanted to ask, because a lot of people, when we go to Peden, we get these in the various parcels.
Yeah.
After we've been to a particular puja ceremony. And I was actually given this one by Natalie, I think probably 10 years ago. And I'm just wondering, I mean, this has got a beautiful Sri Chakra on it. And we see Amma chanting onto these, don't we, when she's going to consecrate a temple and then they go under the statue. But is there any power in kind of having these on our altar as we're chanting and it gets the vibe or something? You're laughing at me.
I'm laughing at you because this is such an unfair last question.
Oh.
It's actually the next book that Amma has asked me to write is on the science of yantras.
That's a last question in that case.
It's a giant answer, but I'll do my best to try to make it as concise as possible without totally geeking out on you, because there's actually so much
geek out.
Geek out. Okay. So if you look at mantras as vibration,
I'll just hold this up for people to see.
Oh, thank you for doing that. So if you look at mantras as vibration or sound, you know, and then what is then a yantra? So it's said, and we're starting to understand this even from a quantum physics standpoint, that sound can be turned into light, okay? And when sound is turned into light, it takes on a certain geometry. And so that geometry, when it's captured, when the geometry of a mantra is captured, what you have then is a yantra that fits a particular mantra. And so then what happens as you're starting to charge or chant to yantra? They're usually made out of metal, typically copper, because why? Because metals have an ability to conduct energy, conduct sound. And so as you begin to do that, now the yantra actually has the geometry of that sound. And so as you're chanting, that geometry is literally charging or capturing that sound. And so eventually, and it depends for different people how long it's going to take, it depends on the, you know, what's the right word, on the ability of your yourself to be able to create that cosmic energy. For example, Amma can charge a yantra in 6 seconds. For most people, it takes, you know, it can take 12 to 24 years for particular yantras to be charged. So it just depends.
Someone said you have to do a chant 10,000 times or something.
No, it depends on the person chanting. You can't ascribe a number. You can say for that the average human being, it takes a long time. But, you know, for siddhas, they could charge a yantra immediately. Amma can charge a yantra immediately. And so once you have that charged yantra, now it's like a little machine. It is generating that frequency on your behalf wherever you have placed it. And it's like an eternal loop. You know, it just gets charged over and over and over on its own. And that's the secret of yantras. And this is the last thing I'm going to leave you with, because, you know, it's very fascinating, but this will take a book to explain. The human nervous system is actually built as a yantra. And so ultimately, when we're doing these mantras, we're eventually trying to charge the human nervous system, and it has a very specific geometry at different areas on the spine. And once those become charged, that is when the mantra is no longer needed, because now you're just conducting that cosmic current all of the time. And that is one kind of description of the physical state of enlightenment.
Wow. Amazing. I can't wait. So for everybody who's watching on Facebook, when I put this up there, this is Kulreet's current book, which is called Sound Medicine, and it's brilliant, and I highly recommend it. I actually can highly recommend The Prime. It's an amazing book as well. I absolutely loved it. And that's more for people who want to lose weight, isn't it? Or to just kind of get into a slightly more Ayurvedic lifestyle with some very simple techniques and powders and teas and so on. And then the next book. So have you started it, or how many years do we have to wait?
I never know. I always you know, it's just like with this book, I had no intention of writing this book. It's pretty much when Amma says, okay, now start, that's when, you know, I'll start. But there's been a lot of information that's been coming to me about yantras that I've brought up, you know, to I'm really excited to start it. I can't wait. I'm geeking out big time because I go heavily into the relationship between sound and electromagnetic fields. And I'll tell you that a future Nobel Prize in medicine or physics or biology is going to be the person that figures out how to prove that sound is translated into electromagnetic waves, which is then translated into biochemistry. I already have an experiment in mind. If I can pull it off, it would revolutionize medicine. Whoever does that is going to revolutionize medicine. Okay, well, we'll have to look forward to that. Kulreet, stay on the line for a minute because I want to ask you a question afterwards. But for everybody else, I'm going to say that's the end of the formal questions here. Actually, I might just call you straight back on Zoom if that's okay. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. It's been a revelation. It's been brilliant. And I can't wait to listen to it again. I hope the recordings worked. And I'll call you back in a minute. Sounds good. Thank you. Thanks, Kulreet.